It started out with a simple phrase.
You can't really go anywhere and not find someone that doesn't know what Star Wars is.
I knew for sure that, oh my God, this is going to be like the biggest hit ever.
And gave birth to a gaming dynasty.
Star Wars, the original arcade game, at the time, it was like the coolest thing ever.
Gamers are looking for something in their Star Wars game that kind of makes them feel the way they do when they see a Star Wars film.
That tumbled down.
The company lost its way. We were making way too many Star Wars games that, at the end of the day, sucked.
And was rebuilt.
I think the Star Wars brand is definitely stronger today than at any point in history.
In the year 1977, the Voyager space probe is launched. The Apple II personal computer goes on sale for the first time. And a young filmmaker named George Lucas introduces America to a galaxy far, far away.
I grew up with Star Wars, and in 1977, I was a 5-year-old. Got to see it for the first time with my dad at a drive-in movie theater.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
And we loved the movie so much, and I was just so amazed by it.
I remember waiting in line to see all the movies, you know, seeing Darth Vader. You just have those memories, you just don't forget.
This cold chill just went over me because I realized it was a great movie.
Good luck.
I just was thrilled. Even at that point, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be like the biggest hit ever.
Star Wars: A New Hope does more than redefine movie making. It creates an entire generation of fans and becomes a worldwide phenomenon.
It's such a part of the world culture. You can't really go anywhere and not find someone that doesn't know what Star Wars is.
In 1980, The Empire Strikes Back stuns audiences all over again. Star Wars merchandising is all the rage. 2 years later, Parker Brothers brings Star Wars to the virtual world with The Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600 and starts the Star Wars gaming franchise.
You flew around a snowspeeder, which essentially was about 8 pixels arranged to look like a snowspeeder, flying across this snowy landscape and shooting at AT-ATs.
Come on!
When Return of the Jedi comes out in 1983, Atari gives gamers a chance to fly an X-Wing fighter in Star Wars: The Arcade Game.
The great thing about the original arcade game was you wanted to be Luke Skywalker. And you wanted to be the pilot of an X-Wing fighter, shooting down TIE fighters and blowing up the Death Star. And that game actually let you do it.
Yahoo!
And it's vector graphics, but at the time, it was like the coolest thing ever.
That same year, George Lucas is given a unique offer.
George had now achieved enormous prominence. Atari came to him and they said, we've got a lot of money we want to throw your way because we think you're very creative and you'll create something wonderful. And George, instead of just kind of doing a project for Atari, said, oh, here's the seed money to start an entire division.
Lucasfilm Games is formed, but this new development house doesn't make Star Wars games. Instead, it focuses on original titles such as Ball Blazer. A few Star Wars games are released by other companies after the gaming crash in the mid-'80s. But Lucasfilm Games won't make a Star Wars title of their own until 1991, 6 years after Nintendo's NES kickstarts the industry.
The 8-bit Nintendo was pretty popular at the time, and we figured, well, we should do a Star Wars game. And so we finally got access to Star Wars, and the first game we did was... It was very much a Mario-esque, cute little platformer. Then Nintendo unveiled their Super Nintendo system and said, wow, look at all these colors, look at all this stuff we can do. And we started working on the Super Star Wars game. And then Super Empire Strikes Back was the next game we did. We spent a lot more attention on the lightsaber stuff. Return of the Jedi. We had to do Bikini Princess Leia because, you know, she was in the slave girl outfit.
The Super Star Wars lineup is a hit. And in 1992, Lucasfilm Games changes their name to LucasArts. Next, the empire that Lucas built will focus its talents on the PC and bring about an unforgettable era of Star Wars games.
Hey, prepare the attack.
It's 10 years after Return of the Jedi, and the Star Wars phenomenon is as strong as ever. Thanks in part to a growing collection of Star Wars video games.
These Star Wars miniatures. I like video games better. Video games does everything for you.
LucasArts takes the fever to a new high when they begin releasing Star Wars games for the PC.
After we finished the Super Nintendo games, we were waiting for the next generation of consoles. Meanwhile, Larry Holland was working on World War II flight simulators for LucasArts. We wanted to do a Star Wars game. A couple of us who were working on the Super Nintendo games said, well, I want to do that too.
People started looking at the flight simulator engine and thinking, we could really use this in the Star Wars environment.
One of the sort of quintessential elements of the Star Wars movies was their spacecraft battles. When they were working on those parts of the movie, we're actually looking at World War II gun camera footage to recreate those experiences.
And at that time, flight simulators were very stiff and flying slowly and shooting little bullets, and we just wanted that crazy, roaring Star Wars dogfight experience. Laser bolts flying every which way and barrel rolls and all that kind of stuff.
Target destroyed.
When X-Wing was released, the fan and the critic reaction really exceeded our expectations. It really just sort of took off like, you know, an X-Wing into hyperspace.
Fantastic experience. Flight sim light, everything that's fun about flight simulators, but without you having to really learn the mechanics. Of course, it's in space. You didn't have to worry about stalling or any of the kind of the complex aerodynamics of a flight simulation, and you're in the Star Wars universe.
Base 1, we're starting our attack run.
And then we followed that up with Rebel Assault, which was our second Star Wars game and our first PC CD-ROM game. They were very different games. One was an action arcade game, one was a flight simulator game. They put us on the map with PC games that were innovative. And then they established Star Wars in the gaming space that had never been established before.
LucasArts launches a sequel to X-Wing 1 year later.
Our capable forces, led by Darth Vader, are striking back.
The next step was we really wanted to turn the whole series on its head and design it from a totally different perspective.
We turned the story upside down and said, well, I want to fly for the Empire.
The sequel to X-Wing was not X-Wing 2, but it was TIE Fighter. That really helped to give a whole different feel and look.
The rebels are unprepared for our attack.
Particularly because the approach we took was not tongue-in-cheek, but was serious to make it believable that a player could and would want to see the other side of evil.
There was a whole new appeal attached to that, and now the rebels had become terrorists. They were no longer plucky freedom fighters, and you totally got suckered in by the Empire propaganda.
Soon, peace and order will be restored throughout the galaxy.
Brilliant game, fantastic flight dynamics, so much fun.
TIE Fighter is an even bigger hit than X-Wing. Earning high praise from critics and gamers alike, LucasArts is on a winning streak, and Star Wars fans are as ravenous as ever.
I've been in tattoos for about 15 years. I've been collecting Star Wars tattoos for longer than that. I have implants to make my Tusken Raider eyes pop out.
When Dark Forces is released in 1995, they get a chance to step into a storyline that's outside of the films.
Dark Forces was the first-person shooters in the series.
Yeah, Dark Forces was huge. That was right at the same time Doom came out, Dark Forces came out and had, in my opinion, a better story and an equally good engine.
The player takes a role of character named Kyle Katarn as he fights this new threat called the Dark Troopers.
What have you done with Jan? If any harm comes to her, I'll personally shove my blaster down your slimy throat.
It was the first time they just decided to, instead of rehashing an old battle, they just kind of put new characters in the same time period. So you're kind of like crossing paths with Luke and Boba Fett, and it was a brilliant idea.
The first Star Wars game that really immersed me in the world of Star Wars had to be Dark Forces. I remember in college sitting in a friend of mine's dorm room. He had his stereo hooked up to the computer, and he jacked up the sound really loud. It was really the first time that I was like in that world running around the Death Star, and it was really an amazing experience.
Thanks to the X-Wing series and Dark Forces, Star Wars fans are able to relive some of their favorite moments from the films in ways never before imagined. LucasArts is riding high, but their overconfidence eventually becomes their undoing.
Knockout. You lose.
I'd better be getting paid for this.
You're not authorized in this area.
After the 1995 release of Dark Forces, the Star Wars franchise continues to fly high. Games like Rebel Assault 2.
You have failed me for the last time.
And Shadows of the Empire help keep the Star Wars universe in the public eye, and the phenomenon shows no signs of slowing down.
It's a 74 Chevelle, Malibu Classic. My wife said, what a piece of junk. And from that time on, she's been dubbed the Millennium Falcon.
In 1997, Star Wars fans finally get a taste of what it's like to be a Jedi in Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight.
Jedi Knight was a great LucasArts project because it was so high-tech for the time.
Finally pull out a lightsaber in Jedi Knight. People got to play a Jedi for the first time.
Stormtroopers. In the first game, he was just kind of a pistol-shooting bounty hunter. And this time we're like, let's give him a lightsaber.
Use it well. Use it for good.
Everyone really wants to play with a lightsaber.
Jedi Knight is a massive success. Meanwhile, the X-Wing series continues with the release of X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter.
After the TIE Fighter game came out in 1994, it was the debut and arrival of multiplayer gaming.
Remember our mission goal.
X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter was kind of the first step for LucasArts in going to the online multiplayer arena.
So we took on the technical challenge and the design challenge of taking what to then was a single-player game and create a wholly focused multiplayer game. It didn't have story, but allowed squadron mates to sort of prove who is best in actual combat.
It seems that LucasArts can do no wrong when it comes to Star Wars games, but that soon changes. As LucasArts begins to put the Star Wars name on more and more games, the quality of their titles begins to wane.
LucasArts has kind of a spotty history with Star Wars. You kind of feel like they've been trying to squeeze it dry a little too much.
Games like Force Commander, Masters of Terras Kasi, and Star Wars Rebellion are critical flops.
Perhaps there's been some mistake.
The license is being used for everything from Star Wars chess
Oh my. Oh, my head.
to Star Wars Monopoly. The games begin to rely more on the Star Wars name instead of the Star Wars experience.
It became very apparent that we were flooding the marketplace with mediocre games, and our consumers couldn't absorb them, nor were they happy with the quality level. And we had completely walked away from the heydays of the early 90s with our PC heritage.
I think in many ways, Star Wars as a gaming franchise is kind of a victim of its own success.
You lose.
Then it became almost like, let's find a genre, let's find a hit game, and how can we wrap a Star Wars wrapper around it? And this is how we ended up with the Star Wars real-time strategy games, the Star Wars turn-based strategy game, the Star Wars Yoda desktop adventures, which was just, I think, a particular low point.
But in 1999, Star Wars fans find a new hope in the arrival of Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace. LucasArts capitalizes on the prequel by releasing numerous games based on the film. Faithful fans and gamers alike are excited by this new era of Star Wars games, but they don't stay that way for long.
I think towards the end of the 90s, the company lost its way. We were making way too many games, particularly way too many Star Wars games, that at the end of the day sucked.
Mini-games, such as Obi-Wan,
Kill the Jedi,
are huge letdowns, and the public begins to lose faith in LucasArts.
It's kind of sad.
But there are a few gems to be found in the clutter of lackluster Star Wars games.
Rogue Squadron, that was kind of our dream project. We always wanted to try free flight, 360-degree freedom of movement, where you can fly anywhere, an action game, which still is very, very easy and accessible to the player.
I copy. The Episode 1 pod racing game. Nobody ever thought you could do a Star Wars racing game. That seems a little weird.
You got a really visceral sense of the speed, which was nice. I mean, you got to see kind of what it was like to be in these things that were going faster than you could imagine going in a car. It was a lot of fun.
As the new millennium gets underway, LucasArts realizes that they need to rework their Star Wars lineup.
What we really need to do is put the Lucas back in LucasArts. The magic, the creativity, and the innovation. What we needed to do is go out with great games, but go out with fewer of them so that people could actually have the time and the money to enjoy them.
Will LucasArts be able to bring about a new golden age of Star Wars games? Or is the franchise beyond redemption? The arrival of next-generation systems opened the door for a new level of gaming, just as LucasArts sets out to repair their image. One of their first steps is the 2001 release of Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader from Factor 5 Studios.
All squadrons, follow me!
It wasn't really a deep, complex flight sim. Jog down the street and pick up a controller and fly an X-Wing. When you played the Death Star attack mission, you actually felt like you were Luke going in on the attack line on the Death Star and blowing it up.
We're building the Death Star. All the fans show up, take some foam core, build a piece of the Death Star. It's going to be 60 feet long.
As Star Wars fans are wowed by the visuals and intense action of Rogue Leader, LucasArts releases two more hits, Jedi Academy and Jedi Outcast.
Jedi Outcast allowed you to play as a Jedi. It really felt like you had control of what you were doing with the lightsaber and the Force powers. I think it was the best Jedi experience at the time.
LucasArts is slowly but surely returning the Star Wars franchise to its former glory. And in 2003, they get a massive boost from BioWare with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
The Knights of the Republic games were set about 4,000 years before the movie.
The dark side has wholly consumed me.
So it gave us huge opportunity to completely have an open canvas for new storytelling and new force powers, really exploit what role-playing is all about.
Knights of the Old Republic is probably the best piece of Star Wars content in any medium in the last 10 years, including the movies.
We've won something like 45 Game of the Year awards.
Now, Star Wars fans have a whole new Star Wars era to explore, and they love it. In 2003, LucasArts launches Star Wars Galaxies, and for the first time ever, fans can live in a virtual Star Wars universe.
Star Wars Galaxies are our first foray into the massively multiplayer online game genre.
We decided to set it in the classic Star Wars time frame because that's where the hardcore Star Wars fans' passion lies. But the most exciting thing is that this is the first opportunity for Star Wars fans to really live out Star Wars existences on their own.
Despite the high level of anticipation Star Wars fans have for Galaxies, it's met with mixed reactions.
Clear!
Meanwhile, LucasArts continues to rebuild the Star Wars franchise with a collection of solid titles.
Star Wars Republic Commando is a very different kind of Star Wars experience where we're putting you into the member of the elite military of the Republic Army. So it's a military experience set in the Star Wars universe.
Star Wars Battlefront was a great project, a lot of work, but the game allowed the player to live all the great battles that you saw from all the movies. But so you're not necessarily the hero, but you actually get to run out there and feel like you're part of those great battles.
The Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith game is the ultimate Jedi action experience. We're letting gamers play as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker.
Come back to the light. It's too late.
With the most fluid, intense, and cinematically accurate Jedi lightsaber combat we've ever done in a game.
As the Star Wars prequels come to an end, LucasArts continues to reclaim their former glory. Not every game will be a hit, but the future looks bright.
Well, let me dispel a myth in that this is the last Star Wars movie, but I will tell you, the Star Wars brand is going to continue on as strong as it ever has been.
I think the Star Wars brand is definitely stronger today than any point in history.
Going beyond the films and other areas of Star Wars is important, but there has to be something about the Star Wars game that kind of makes gamers feel the experience of seeing a Star Wars film.
The games are going to be more successful as the franchise continues.
There have been definitely hits and misses throughout time, but I'll be honest with you, it's less about the past, it's all about the future.